I'll start off with a fairy tale. I've been a huge fan of Brothers Grimm since, and most fairy tales in fact, since I was a child, I suppose. So I wanted to do a poem that had like the best bits of everything, and so this is it. This is called If You Go Down to the Woods. George set off for a Sunday stroll in the woods not far from home. A bright winter's day, not a fleck of grey, and a morning that was all his own. He ambled along the crooked path that nature's travellers had forged. A shaft of sunlight gave warm breath as spotlight as it plumed round the head of George. A sting of light caught George's eye, brighter than the sun. Each flicker pulled George faster, from a stride to a trot to a run. And in the glade up ahead, buried in the bark of an oak surrounded by thicket, poised a beautiful, shining silver axe, so George decided to nick it. He grabbed the handle and tugged at the chopper, but the thing was buried deep. So he heaved it apart and shot out like a dart, and George collapsed in a heap. He leapt up and looked round for his new acquisition, but all that met him was panic and dread. The axe had landed square in the temple of Little Red Riding Hood's head. Horror seized the soul of George, and his thoughts turned to jail. How many years for killing the star of a classic children's fairy tale? He looked in Red's basket, there was food and a note. She was off to see Granny. Oh hell. He'd not only killed the poor little girl, he'd fucked up her story as well. Irrational thoughts raced through George's head. He had to finish the fairy tale. So he stole Red's cape and raided her basket for lipstick and false nails. He grabbed his mobile, punched in 118 and asked the address of Granny's pad. But sadly, she was ex-directory. This was looking bad. Not to be perturbed, he set off down the path, hoping to ask directions along the way. And before too long, he bumped into a wolf. It was going to be okay. George decided not to waste any time. He rushed straight over and smiled. "I'm off to Granny's cottage, be there in 5 minutes. I'll be there in a little while." George hung back to give the wolf a head start, then continued on his way. And soon he found a quaint little cottage. It was George's lucky day. He knocked and entered and went upstairs, and there on the largest of 3 beds, the figure was hiding under the covers, but George couldn't see its head. "What big eyes you have!" he yelled at the bed, and the figure shot out of its socks. "Who the fuck are you?" asked the confused George to a young girl with golden locks. George felt a grip on his shoulder and looking round saw 3 large bears. "I think I'm in the wrong house," squeaked George. "Too fucking right you are," said the bears. Later, bruised and bleeding, George picked himself out of the mud and removed a bear claw from his backside and tried to wash off the blood. He leapt into the woods to find the right house and bumped into 2 kids with some bread. "I'm Hansel, this is Gretel," said a frightened boy. "There's a girl back there with an axe in her head." "Don't you start," said George, still bleeding. "Do you know where I can find Granny's hut?" "Yes, 2 miles down the road, left at the sycamore and straight through the cut." George slapped on some more lipstick and set off as fast as he could, when out of nowhere a boy leapt into the wood clearing and frantically tugged George's hood. "I can't find my axe! I've got to chop down a beanstalk! A giant wants me dead!" "There's one about a mile behind me," said George, "full of the blood and bread." It was an hour before George finally reached Granny's, and to his awestruck alarm, the wolf was leaning by the door with Belgian chocolates under his arm. A frown furrowed in the face of the bewildered beast, and he shouted angrily, "You're late! I've been waiting here for over an hour. I thought we had a date. I had plans to eat 3 little pigs today, till you arrived with the come on, and on top of that, there's a transvestite wolf in there. What the hell is going on?" George looked at his tattered cape. The day couldn't get any more bizarre. He'd killed a celebrity, been assaulted by bears, but putting moves on the wrong wolf was the weirdest by far. George wearily scanned the wolf up and down and looked at the chockies in his paws. So he straightened himself up and he combed his hair and he said, "So, my place or yours?"